My name is Isabella, and this is the story of how I went from being called worthless to owning everything that once belonged to the man who destroyed me. For 5 years, I believed I was living the perfect life. Marcus Whitfield, my husband, was everything a woman could want: handsome, successful, charming. He owned 3 luxury car dealerships across the city, lived in a mansion in the hills, and treated me like a princess at least. That is what everyone saw from the outside. The truth was much darker. "Isabella, you are embarrassing me again," Marcus hissed under his breath, as we stood at another charity gala. I had just tried to join a conversation about business investments, something I had always been passionate about. "Just smile and look pretty, that is all you are good for." I forced a smile, the same smile I had perfected over the years. The smile that hid the pain, the loneliness, the constant feeling that I was slowly disappearing inside my own life. Marcus had a way of making me feel small, insignificant. He controlled every aspect of my life. What I wore, who I spoke to, even what I ate. "Sorry, darling," I whispered back, taking a step behind him like the obedient wife I had become. But the worst part wasn't his control or his cruel words. The worst part was the secret I carried, a secret so heavy it was crushing me from the inside. For 2 years, I had been trying to get pregnant. For 2 years, every month brought the same disappointment. And for 2 years, Marcus had been growing more distant, more cruel, more convinced that I was defective. "What is the point of having a wife who can't even give me children?" he had said just last week, his words cutting through me like a knife. "My friends are starting to ask questions. They think something's wrong with me for staying with a barren woman." That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until there were no tears left. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, a woman I barely recognized. When had I become so small? When had I lost myself so completely? The next morning Marcus was unusually cheerful. He made me breakfast, something he hadn't done in months. He even kissed my forehead before leaving for work. "I love you, Isabella," he said with a smile that should have warmed my heart, but instead made my stomach turn. Something was wrong. Marcus was never this affectionate unless he wanted something, or unless he was hiding something. That afternoon, I decided to surprise him at work. I bought his favorite sandwich from the deli he loved and drove to his main dealership. As I walked through the showroom, I noticed how the staff looked at me, not with respect, but with pity. Some even whispered and looked away quickly. "Mrs. Whitfield," his secretary Janet said nervously when she saw me. "Mr. Whitfield is in a meeting." "I'll wait," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "I brought him lunch." Janet shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward Marcus's office door. "Actually, maybe you should." That is when I heard it. Laughter. Female laughter, followed by Marcus's voice, lower and more intimate than I had heard in years. "She is so clueless, Veronica. She has no idea what is coming." My blood turned to ice. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. Janet tried to stop me, but I was already walking toward the office door. "Marcus, please, just tell her the truth. This is getting ridiculous." The woman's voice was smooth, confident, nothing like mine. "Not yet, baby. I need to make sure everything is in place first. Once the divorce is final and I get everything, we can be together openly." I stood frozen outside the door, my hand hovering over the handle. This couldn't be happening, not now, not like this. "But what about the house? Her name is on the deed too. Don't worry about that." Marcus laughed. "I've been documenting her mental instability for months. Depression, mood swings, inability to function as a wife. My lawyer says it'll be easy to prove she is unfit for marriage. I'll get everything. The house, the businesses, even her grandmother's jewelry." My grandmother's jewelry, the only thing I had left of my family, the only connection to the woman who raised me after my parents died. I couldn't listen anymore. I turned and ran, pushing past Janet, through the showroom, and out into the parking lot. I sat in my car hyperventilating, trying to process what I had just heard. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of giving him everything I had, of becoming smaller and smaller to make him feel bigger, and this was how it ended, with him planning to take everything while calling me mentally unstable. That night, Marcus came home late. As usual, he found me in the kitchen, making dinner like nothing had happened. How was your day, darling? He asked, kissing my cheek with the same lips that had been kissing another woman. Fine, I managed to say, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. How was yours? Busy, very busy. He sat down at the table, waiting for me to serve him like I always did. Actually, Isabella, we need to talk. Here it comes, I thought. The moment that would change everything. I think we should go to counseling, he said, cutting into his steak. You've been different lately, distant, emotional. I am worried about you. The manipulation was so smooth, so calculated. He was setting the stage, creating the narrative of the unstable wife, who couldn't handle the pressure of marriage. Every session would be documented, every tear used as evidence against me. Of course, I said quietly. Whatever you think is best. He smiled, satisfied. Good. I've already made an appointment with Dr. Richardson for next week. He is supposed to be excellent with difficult cases. Difficult cases like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, while Marcus slept peacefully beside me. He had no idea that I had heard everything. He had no idea that I knew about Veronica, about his plans to destroy me and take everything I had. But what he really had no idea about was the truth about who I really was. The next 3 months were the most brutal of my life. Marcus's plan unfolded exactly as I had overheard. The counseling sessions with Dr. Richardson were a joke. Marcus had clearly briefed him beforehand. Every session focused on my inability to cope with the pressures of marriage, my emotional instability, and my failure as a wife. Isabella seems to have difficulty accepting reality, Dr. Richardson would write in his notes, which I later discovered were being sent directly to Marcus's lawyer. She shows signs of depression, anxiety, and possible delusional thinking. Meanwhile, Marcus grew bolder with his affair. Veronica started calling the house, hanging up when I answered. I would find receipts in his pockets for expensive dinners I had never attended, jewelry I had never received. He stopped trying to hide it because he wanted me to find it. He wanted me to break down, to prove his point about my mental state. The final blow came on a Thursday morning in October. I was in the garden, tending to the roses my grandmother had planted years ago, when Marcus came outside with an envelope in his hand. Isabella, he said, his voice cold and formal. We need to talk. I stood up slowly, dirt on my hands, my heart pounding. This was it. I am filing for divorce, he said simply, handing me the envelope. You have 48 hours to find somewhere else to live. I took the papers with trembling hands. The words blurred together, but I caught the important parts: irreconcilable differences, mental instability, unfit for marriage. He was asking for everything: the house, his businesses, even my personal belongings. Marcus, please, I whispered. We can work this out. We can go to counseling, real counseling, Isabella. His voice was sharp, cutting. Look at yourself. Look at what you've become. You can't give me children. You can't function as a wife. You spend your days talking to plants and living in fantasies about your dead grandmother. I need a real woman, not a broken little girl playing house. Each word was designed to cut deeper than the last, and it worked. I felt myself crumbling, becoming even smaller than I already was. But this is my home too, I said weakly. My grandmother's things are here, her jewelry, her photos, where they were here. Marcus smiled cruelly. I had them appraised yesterday. Very valuable, actually. They'll help cover the cost of my lawyer. My knees gave out. I collapsed onto the grass, the divorce papers scattered around me like fallen leaves. He had sold my grandmother's jewelry, the last pieces of my family, the only things that connected me to who I used to be. You can't. I sobbed. Those weren't yours to sell. They were mine. They were all I had left, actually. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a document. Your signature says otherwise. Remember last month when you signed those papers to update our insurance? You actually signed ownership of all personal valuables over to me. My lawyer is very thorough. The papers, I remembered them now. Marcus had rushed me, said they were just routine paperwork for our homeowner's insurance. I had trusted him, signed them without reading carefully. You bastard, I whispered, the first spark of anger breaking through my grief. Careful, Isabella. Dr. Richardson warned me about your violent tendencies. I have him on speed dial. Marcus crouched down next to me, his voice low and menacing. You have 48 hours, pack whatever clothes you can carry and get out. If you try to fight this, I'll have you committed. Don't test me. He stood up and walked away, leaving me broken on the grass surrounded by the roses my grandmother had planted with her own hands. That night, I sat in what used to be my bedroom, looking around at the life I was about to lose. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of slowly giving away pieces of myself, until there was almost nothing left. And now, in 48 hours, I would have nothing at all. I packed a single suitcase with the clothes Marcus deemed appropriate. Mostly old, worn things he had never liked, everything beautiful. Everything that made me feel like myself, was gone, sold, or claimed as his property. On my last night in the house, I walked through every room, saying goodbye to the only real home I had ever known. In the kitchen, I ran my fingers along the countertops where my grandmother had taught me to bake. In the living room, I touched the mantel where her photos used to sit before Marcus had them, appraised. But it was in the garden where I broke down completely. I knelt by the roses, my grandmother's roses, and cried until I had no tears left. These flowers had been my only real companions for the past year, the only things that listened without judgment, that loved without conditions. I am so sorry, Grandmama, I whispered to the night air. I let him take everything, I failed you. The next morning, Marcus was already gone when I came downstairs with my single suitcase. There was an envelope on the kitchen table with my name on it. Inside was a check for $500 and a note. This should cover a motel for a few weeks. Don't come back, don't call, don't embarrass yourself any further. You are free now to figure out who you really are without me. Good luck, you'll need it. Mem, $500. That is what 5 years of my life was worth to him. I took one last look around the house that had been my prison for so long, picked up my suitcase, and walked out the front door. I didn't look back. The roadside motel was exactly as depressing as it sounded. $20 a night. Thin walls, stained carpet, and a shower that barely produced lukewarm water. It was all I could afford, and even then, I knew the money would run out soon. I lay on the scratchy bedspread, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, trying to figure out how my life had become so small. 5 years ago, I had been Isabella Martinez, college graduate with a degree in business management. I had dreams, plans, ambitions. Then I met Marcus, and slowly, piece by piece, I gave all of that away. No, I was nobody. No job, no references, no family, no friends. Marcus had made sure of that, over the years, slowly isolating me from anyone who might have helped me remember who I used to be. The first week was the hardest. I walked around the city applying for jobs, but my resume was 5 years out of date. Most employers took one look at me, a woman with haunted eyes and secondhand clothes, and politely declined. Have you worked recently? They would ask. I was taking care of my home, I would answer, hating how small my voice sounded. I see, well, we'll be in touch. They never were. By the second week, I was desperate. I started applying for anything: retail, food service, cleaning. Finally, a woman named Rosa at Martinez family restaurant took pity on me. You look hungry, Mija, she said in accented English, studying my face. You know how to wash dishes. It wasn't much minimum wage, cash under the table, 6 days a week, but it was something. I worked in the back, invisible and forgotten, scrubbing pots and loading plates while the world moved on without me. The other workers were kind enough, but they had their own problems. I was just another lost soul washing dishes to survive. During my breaks, I would sit in the alley behind the restaurant and watch the people walking by. Busyness, people in expensive suits, couples holding hands, families laughing together. I felt like a ghost watching the living at night. I would return to my motel room and count my money. After paying for the room and buying the cheapest food I could find, I was barely breaking even. I was trapped in a cycle with no way out. The loneliness was the worst part. I had no one to talk to. No one who cared whether I lived or died. Marcus had been cruel, but at least I had mattered enough to be cruel too. Now I was nothing to no one. One particularly bad night, about a month after leaving the house, I was walking back from work when I passed by the old neighborhood. I don't know what possessed me to go there. Maybe I just wanted to see the roses one more time, to remember what it felt like to have a home. The house looked different. There was a new car in the driveway, a red convertible that screamed, midlife crisis. The garden was overgrown, my grandmother's roses dying from neglect. It broke my heart to see them like that, abandoned and forgotten. I was about to leave when the front door opened. Marcus stepped out with a woman I recognized from the photos in his wallet. Veronica was younger than me, blonde. Everything I wasn't. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than I made in a month. They were laughing about something completely oblivious to my presence across the street. Marcus opened the car door for her like a gentleman. Something he had stopped doing for me years ago. They drove off into the night, probably to some expensive restaurant where Marcus would order wine and tell her how lucky he was to have found a real woman. I stood there until long after they were gone, crying silently in the shadows. That could have been me in that car, wearing that dress, being treated like I mattered. Instead, I was a ghost haunting my own former life, but it was what happened next that would change everything. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. There was a piece of mail sticking out of the mailbox, blown loose by the wind. Without thinking, I walked over and picked it up. It was addressed to Isabella Martinez, Whitfield, in care of the old address. The return address made my heart stop. Goldstein, Massachusetts. Martinez and Associates, attorneys at law. Martinez. My maiden name was Martinez, but it was also my grandmother's name. She had been Isabella Martinez too, before she married my grandfather. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. Dear Miss Isabella Martinez, we have been attempting to locate you regarding an urgent matter concerning the estate of Isabella Martinez de Santos, your paternal grandmother. Please contact our office immediately regarding inheritance matters that require your immediate attention. Time is of the essence. Please call 555 Gold Law at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, David Goldstein, ESQ. I read the letter 3 times before the words sank in. My grandmother's estate. But she had died when I was 12, leaving me with nothing but memories and the jewelry that Marcus had stolen and sold, or so I had thought. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fold the letter back up. I looked around the empty street, half expecting someone to jump out and tell me this was all a cruel joke, but there was no one, just me, standing in the shadows outside my former home, holding what might be the answer to everything. I ran all the way back to the motel, clutching the letter like a lifeline in my dingy room. Under the harsh fluorescent light, I read it again, and again, each time. The words stayed the same, Isabella Martinez de Santos. That had been my grandmother's full name. I had never known about the de Santos part. My mother had only ever called her Grandmama Bella. I stared at the phone number on the letter. It was after midnight, too late to call. But I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the letter, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't dare believe. What if this was real? What if my grandmother had left me something, some small inheritance that Marcus hadn't known about? Even a few $1,000s would change everything for me. I could get a real apartment, buy some decent clothes, start over properly. But another part of me, the part that had been beaten down for so long, whispered that this was probably just a mistake. A case of mistaken identity. Someone else named Isabella Martinez, who actually mattered to someone. I spent the rest of the night staring at that letter, hope and fear warring in my chest. By morning, I had convinced myself that calling would only lead to disappointment. But I had to know. At exactly 9 a.m., I dialed the number with shaking fingers. Goldstein Martinez and Associates, how may I help you? Hi. I received a letter about Isabella Martinez de Santos. This is Isabella Martinez. Oh my goodness. Miss Martinez, we've been looking for you for months. Please hold while I connect you to Mr. Goldstein. Months? They had been looking for me for months? Miss Martinez. A warm professional voice came on the line. David Goldstein, thank you so much for calling. I am afraid we have a rather complicated situation here. Could you possibly come into our office today? This really isn't something we can discuss over the phone. Yes, I suppose so, but I should tell you, I am not sure I am the right Isabella Martinez. Miss Martinez, Mr. Goldstein interrupted gently, I believe you are exactly who we've been looking for. Can you be here at 2 p.m.? I looked down at my stained uniform, my work, worn hands, my reflection in the motel room mirror. I am not exactly presentable for a law office. Please don't worry about that. Just come as you are, time really is of the essence here. After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence. This was really happening. In 5 hours I would know the truth about whatever my grandmother had left behind. I used my last few dollars to take a taxi to the law office. It was in the expensive part of town, housed in a gleaming glass building that made me feel even smaller than usual. But Mr. Goldstein's secretary was kind, offering me coffee and treating me with a respect I hadn't experienced in years. When Mr. Goldstein came out to greet me, he was not what I expected. He was probably in his 60s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that put me at ease immediately. "Miss Martinez," he said, shaking my hand warmly, "thank you for coming. I know this must be confusing for you." He led me into his office, which was filled with law books and family photos. On his desk was a thick file with my name on it. "First," he said, settling into his chair, "I need to verify your identity. Can you tell me your grandmother's full name?" "Isabella Martinez," I said, though apparently it was Isabella Martinez de Santos. "I never knew about the de Santos part," Mr. Goldstein nodded. "And can you tell me about her jewelry specifically, a ring she used to wear?" My heart clenched. It was beautiful, silver, with a large emerald surrounded by small diamonds. She always told me it had been in our family for generations. She left it to me, but my husband sold it." Mr. Goldstein's expression grew grave. "I see. Well, Miss Martinez, I am afraid I have some shocking news. Your grandmother didn't just leave you jewelry. She left you something much more significant." He opened the file and pulled out several documents. "Isabella Martinez de Santos was not just your grandmother. She was the sole owner of de Santos Mining Corporation, one of the largest emerald mining operations in the world." The room started spinning. "I am sorry, what? Your grandmother owned emerald mines in Colombia, diamond mines in South Africa, and various other mineral rights around the world. The corporation has been held in trust since her death, waiting for her heir to come of age and claim it." I stared at him, unable to process the words. But she was just my grandmother. She lived in a small house, she grew roses, she made me sandwiches. She was also one of the wealthiest women in Latin America," Mr. Goldstein said gently. "She chose to live simply, but she built an empire. And according to her will, it all goes to her granddaughter, Isabella Martinez, on her 30th birthday." "My 30th birthday, that was next week. How much?" I whispered. Mr. Goldstein slid a piece of paper across the desk. On it was a number so large I couldn't even pronounce it properly. "Approximately $2.8 billion, he said quietly, "plus the mining operations, which generate roughly $400 million in profit annually." The room went completely silent. I stared at the number, my brain unable to process it. "Billion, not million. Billion. I think I am going to be sick," I managed to say. Mr. Goldstein quickly poured me a glass of water. "I understand this is overwhelming. But Miss Martinez, there is more. The trust has very specific conditions. If you had not claimed your inheritance by your 30th birthday, it would have been donated to charity. We've been searching for you desperately. But how could you not find me? I've been living in the same city, under the name Isabella Whitfield," he said. "We were looking for Isabella Martinez. It wasn't until we expanded our search to include married names that we found you. Even then, it took months to track down your current address." My current address, the motel room that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. "Miss Martinez," Mr. Goldstein leaned forward. "In 1 week, you will officially inherit one of the largest fortunes in the world, but there are decisions that need to be made immediately. The corporation needs leadership, the trust needs to be activated, and there are legal matters that cannot wait." I sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this information with my reality. Yesterday, I was washing dishes for minimum wage. Today I was apparently a billionaire. "I don't understand," I said finally. "Why didn't she tell me? Why did she live so simply if she had all this money?" Mr. Goldstein smiled sadly. "According to her letters, which are part of the inheritance, she wanted you to grow up knowing the value of simple things. She was afraid that knowing about the money too young would change you, corrupt you. She wanted you to learn to work, to love, to live as a normal person before the wealth found you. Her letters. He pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with wax. She wrote you a letter for your 30th birthday, and several others for different occasions. This one is marked to be opened on the day she learns the truth. With trembling hands, I broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter. It was written in my grandmother's familiar handwriting. My dearest Isabella, if you are reading this, it means you have discovered the truth about our family's legacy. I know this must come as a shock, and I pray that life has not been too cruel to you before this moment. I chose not to tell you about the money because I wanted you to know who you really are before you know what you have. I wanted you to understand that your worth comes not from what you own, but from who you choose to be. By now, you have lived. You have loved. You have lost. You have been tested by life. You know what it means to work for something, to fight for something, to survive when everything seems hopeless. These lessons will serve you well in the years to come. The De Santos family has been mining emeralds for over 300 years. We have always believed that true wealth comes from the earth, but true richness comes from the heart. Use this inheritance wisely, my love. Help others who are lost as you once were. Build something beautiful with what I have given you. But most importantly, never let anyone make you feel small again. You are a De Santos woman. We bow to no one. All my love. Your grandmama Bella. P.S. The ring I always wore. It wasn't just a family heirloom. It was cut from the first emerald ever mined from our family's land. I am sorry someone took it from you, but don't worry. Where you are going, you can buy 1,000 rings more beautiful than that one. I was crying by the time I finished reading. Through my tears, I looked up at Mr. Goldstein, who was watching me with kind, patient eyes. What happens now? I asked. Now, he said, standing up and extending his hand, we make you one of the most powerful women in the world. But first, I think you need some proper clothes and a good meal. Being a billionaire is exhausting work. As I shook his hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope, not just hope for survival, but hope for something bigger. Something powerful. Marcus thought he had destroyed me. He thought he had taken everything I had. He had no idea what was coming. The next week passed like a dream, or maybe like someone else's life that I was watching from the outside. Mr. Goldstein introduced me to a team of people whose job it would be to help me navigate my new reality: financial advisors, personal assistants, security consultants, even a stylist who specialized in high net worth individuals. The most important thing, Mr. Goldstein explained as we sat in a conference room overlooking the city, is that you understand you are not just inheriting money, you are inheriting responsibility. De Santos Mining employs over 10,000 people across 12 countries. Your decisions will affect thousands of lives. I nodded, still wearing my waitress uniform, because it was the only decent thing I owned. Tomorrow was my 30th birthday, when the inheritance would officially transfer. But there was so much to learn, so much to understand. There is something else, said Maria Santos, the company's current interim CEO and a distant cousin I'd never known existed. The business world has been waiting to see what happens to De Santos Mining. There are several major competitors who have been positioning themselves to buy us out if no heir appeared. They've been vultures, circling for months. What kind of competitors? I asked. Mining conglomerates, mostly. But there is one company that has been particularly aggressive: Whitfield Enterprises. My blood turned to ice. Whitfield. You know the name. I almost laughed at the irony. Marcus Whitfield is my husband. Well, my ex-husband. The room went completely silent. Maria and Mr. Goldstein exchanged glances. Isabella, Mr. Goldstein said carefully, Marcus Whitfield has been trying to buy De Santos Mining for 3 months. He has made increasingly aggressive offers, claiming he has inside information that the company will be in distress soon due to ownership issues. Inside information. Marcus thought he knew everything about me, thought he had destroyed everything I had. He had no idea he had been trying to buy my company. How aggressive? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Very, Maria replied. He has been spreading rumors that De Santos is unstable, that the missing heir is probably dead, that the company needs strong male leadership to survive. Last week he offered $800 million for the whole operation. $800 million, for a company worth nearly $3 billion. He was trying to buy my birthright for a fraction of its value. What did you tell him? That all offers would be considered after the inheritance situation was resolved, Mr. Goldstein said. He is scheduled to make a final presentation to the board next Tuesday. He seems very confident he'll get the company. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city below. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably celebrating, thinking he was about to acquire the biggest deal of his life, thinking he was smart enough to prey on what he believed was a company in distress. He had no idea that the company belonged to the worthless woman he had thrown away. I want to be at that meeting, I said, turning back to face the room. Isabella, Mr. Goldstein said gently, you don't need to put yourself through that. We can simply reject his offer and move on. No, I said, and for the first time in years, my voice carried real authority. I want to hear what he has to say. I want to see his face when he realizes who owns the company he is trying to steal. Maria smiled slowly. I like her already. The next day was my 30th birthday. I woke up in a luxury hotel suite that Mr. Goldstein had arranged for me, in a bed that cost more than I used to make in a year. For a moment, I lay there trying to convince myself this wasn't all an elaborate dream, but when I looked at the nightstand, there was a small velvet box with a note, Happy birthday, Isabella. Welcome to your birthright. Deep inside the box was a ring, not my grandmother's stolen emerald, but something even more beautiful, a perfect emerald surrounded by diamonds, with an inscription inside the band, Isabella de Santos, a woman who bows to no one. At exactly noon, I signed the papers that officially transferred the de Santos empire to me. The lawyers shook my hand and called me Miss de Santos for the first time. It felt strange but right, like putting on clothes that were always meant to fit me. There is one more thing, Mr. Goldstein said, as the others filed out of the room. Your grandmother left specific instructions about your ex-husband. He handed me another letter. This one was marked, If the man who hurt you ever tries to take what is yours. I opened it with trembling hands. My dearest Isabella, if you are reading this letter, it means someone has tried to steal from our family. Your grandfather always told me that the measure of a person's character is how they treat those they believe have no power to fight back. If this person hurt you when you were vulnerable, if they kicked you when you were down, then they have shown you exactly who they are. Now it is time to show them exactly who you are. You are a De Santos woman. We protect what is ours, and we never forget those who wrong us. Make sure he understands the mistake he has made. With all my love and fury, your grandmama Belai folded the letter carefully and put it in my purse. Marcus wanted to play games. He had no idea who he was playing with. The weekend before Marcus's presentation, I did something I hadn't done in years. I prepared for war. My first stop was the stylist Mr. Goldstein had recommended, a woman named Catherine, who specialized in creating power looks for female executives. I need to look like I own the world, I told her. Because as of yesterday I do. Catherine smiled and got to work. Gone were the second-hand clothes and apologetic posture. In their place, a perfectly tailored black suit that fit like armor, Italian leather shoes that made my footsteps sound like gunshots, and a sleek hairstyle that framed my face like a crown. Power isn't about looking pretty, Catherine explained as she worked. It is about looking inevitable. When she was finished, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was strong, confident, dangerous. She looked like someone who could destroy empires with a glance. Next, I met with Maria to learn everything I needed to know about Marcus's business practices. What I discovered made my blood boil. He has been systematically targeting small mining operations, Maria explained, spreading files across the table. His pattern is to identify struggling companies, spread rumors about their instability to drive down their value, then buy them for pennies on the dollar. He has done this 12 times in the past 5 years. What happens to the workers when he takes over? Mass layoffs. He keeps maybe 20% of the original workforce, cuts all benefits, and squeezes every penny of profit he can before selling the operation to a larger corporation. I thought about the families who had lost their livelihoods so Marcus could make a quick profit. How many lives had he destroyed while I was at home making him dinner? There is more, Maria continued. Our research shows that several of his acquisitions involved falsified reports about the company's financial health. He has been operating on the edge of fraud for years. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Because he is careful. He only targets small companies that don't have the resources to fight back, and he is very good at making himself look legitimate. Maria pulled out a newspaper clipping from last month. The headline read, "Local business leader Marcus Whitfield announces engagement to model Veronica Stevens." The photo showed Marcus and the blonde woman from his office, both smiling at some charity event. The article described them as one of the city's most glamorous power couples. "He has certainly moved on quickly," Maria observed. I studied the photo. Marcus looked exactly the same, handsome, charming, successful. The kind of man other men wanted to be, and women wanted to be with, but now I could see what I had missed before: the coldness in his eyes, the calculated smile, the way he positioned himself to look more important than everyone around him. "Let me ask you something," I said to Maria. "In all your research on Marcus Whitfield, did you find any evidence that he actually loves Veronica, or is she just another acquisition?" Maria raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, look at the timeline. He files for divorce from me in October, claiming I am mentally unstable. By November, he is publicly dating a model. By December, they're engaged. That is not love, that is a business plan." I pulled out my phone and did something I hadn't done in months. I looked up Veronica Stevens on social media. Her Instagram was everything I expected: photos of expensive vacations, designer clothes, fancy restaurants. But as I scrolled through her posts, I noticed something interesting. In every photo with Marcus, she was the one touching him, while he looked like he was posing for a business magazine. She is in love with him, I realized, but he is not in love with her. She is just part of his image upgrade. "How can you tell?" I showed Maria a recent photo of them at a restaurant. "Look at her body language. She is leaning into him, holding his hand, gazing at him adoringly. Now look at his. He is sitting back, barely touching her, looking at the camera instead of her. This is a man who is performing the role of loving boyfriend, not actually being one." So what does that tell us? It tells us that Marcus Whitfield hasn't changed. He is still the same man who manipulates people to get what he wants, and that means he has weaknesses we can exploit. I spent the rest of the weekend studying everything about Marcus's business, his personal life, and most importantly, his presentation to our board. Mr. Goldstein had arranged for me to see his proposal in advance. It was exactly what I expected: a combination of half-truths, inflated claims, and barely veiled threats wrapped in corporate language. Marcus presented himself as the savior DeSantos Mining needed, the strong leader who could guide the company through its ownership crisis. The missing heir is clearly either deceased or incapable of leadership, his proposal read. DeSantos Mining needs immediate stabilization under proven male leadership to prevent total collapse. Proven male leadership, as if women were inherently incapable of running a business. But the most insulting part was his financial offer. He was proposing to buy the company for $800 million, and then immediately sell the mining rights to a Chinese conglomerate for $2.1 billion. He planned to make a $1.3 billion profit while destroying hundreds of jobs. I closed the file and smiled. Marcus had always underestimated me, always assumed I was too naive to see his schemes. This time, that assumption would destroy him. "Are you ready for Tuesday?" Mr. Goldstein asked when I met with him Monday evening. "I've been ready for this moment my entire marriage," I replied. "I just didn't know it." "Isabella, I have to ask. Are you sure you want to do this publicly? We could simply reject his offer privately and avoid the confrontation." I thought about the question seriously. Part of me wanted to hide, to avoid seeing Marcus again, to handle this from a distance like the scared woman I used to be. But that woman was gone. She had died in a motel room a week ago when she read a letter from her grandmother. In her place was someone new. Someone who understood her own power. "Mr. Goldstein," I said. "I spent 5 years being made to feel small, worthless, invisible. I am not going to hide from him anymore. I want him to see exactly what he threw away. I want him to understand the magnitude of his mistake." "And then what? What happens after you humiliate him?" Then I get back to the business of building something beautiful with what my grandmother left me. But first, I need to close this chapter of my life properly. Mr. Goldstein nodded slowly. In that case, I think you should know something else. The board meeting isn't just about Marcus's offer. We've invited several potential investors and business partners to attend. It is going to be a significant industry event. How significant? About 50 of the most powerful people in the mining and investment world will be in that room. Whatever happens on Tuesday will be witnessed by everyone who matters in our industry. Perfect. Marcus had always loved an audience for his performances. Now he would have the biggest audience of his life to witness his downfall. Tuesday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I dressed slowly, deliberately in the black power suit Catherine had chosen for me. I put on the emerald ring my grandmother had left me, and for the first time in months, I looked in the mirror and smiled. The woman looking back at me was not the broken, discarded wife Marcus had thrown away. She was Isabella de Santos, heir to a mining empire, one of the most powerful women in the world, and today, she was going to remind Marcus Whitfield exactly who he had chosen to betray. The De Santos mining headquarters was a gleaming 40-story tower in the heart of the financial district. As I walked through the lobby, I felt the weight of generations of my family's legacy around me. The walls were lined with photos of emerald mines, of my great-grandfather and grandfather, of the empire they had built with their own hands, and now it was mine. The boardroom was on the 40th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. By the time I arrived, it was already full of the most powerful people in the industry: investment bankers, mining executives, financial analysts. These were people who controlled billions of dollars and made decisions that affected entire economies. I entered through a side door and took my seat at the head of the table, in the chair reserved for the owner of De Santos Mining. Several people looked at me curiously, obviously wondering who I was and why I was sitting in such an important position. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Goldstein announced. "Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to introduce someone special. May I present Isabella de Santos, the rightful heir to De Santos Mining Corporation, and as of yesterday, our new owner and CEO." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. These people had been waiting months to see who would inherit the company. And now here I was, a woman none of them had ever heard of, sitting calmly at the head of their table. "Now," Mr. Goldstein continued, "we'll hear the presentation from Marcus Whitfield of Whitfield Enterprises, who has requested to make an offer for the acquisition of De Santos Mining." The boardroom doors opened, and Marcus walked in. He looked exactly the same as always, perfectly groomed, expensive suit, confident swagger. He had a leather portfolio under one arm, and that practiced smile that had once made me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. He walked to the front of the room, completely focused on his presentation materials, not bothering to look at the faces around the table. He was probably nervous, trying to project confidence in front of some of the most powerful people in the industry. "Good morning," he began, his voice strong and commanding. "Thank you all for this opportunity. I know you are all very busy, so I'll get straight to the point." He clicked on his presentation remote, and a slide appeared on the wall screen: Whitfield Enterprises, the leadership De Santos Mining needs. "As you all know," Marcus continued, "De Santos Mining has been in crisis for months due to the absence of clear leadership. What this company needs is immediate, decisive action from someone with proven experience in the mining industry." I sat perfectly still, watching him perform. He had always been good at presentations, at making himself sound indispensable. But now I could see it for what it was: manipulation wrapped in corporate speak. "My company has successfully acquired and revitalized 12 mining operations over the past 5 years," he continued. "We specialize in taking struggling companies and transforming them into profitable enterprises." One of the board members raised his hand. "Mr. Whitfield, our research shows that your revitalization typically involves massive layoffs and asset stripping. How do you respond to that?" Marcus didn't miss a beat. "Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good. A company with 1,000 jobs is better than a company with 0 jobs due to bankruptcy." It was a smooth answer, but I could see some of the board members exchanging skeptical glances. These were serious business people, and they weren't impressed by Marcus's rhetoric. Furthermore, Marcus continued, clicking to his next slide, I have reason to believe that the missing heir situation will never be resolved. My sources suggest that Isabella Martinez de Santos is either deceased or completely incompetent to run a major corporation. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus was so focused on his presentation that he still hadn't looked directly at any of the board members. Which brings me to my offer, he said, his voice growing more confident. Whitfield Enterprises is prepared to purchase De Santos Mining for $800 million cash. With a closing date within 30 days, this will provide immediate stability and prevent the company from falling into bankruptcy due to leadership vacuum. He clicked to his final slide. The choice is clear: strong leadership or inevitable failure. Are there any questions? Marcus asked, finally looking up from his notes. That is when he saw me. The confidence drained from his face so quickly it was almost comical. His mouth fell open and for a moment he just stared at me like I was a ghost. Hello Marcus, I said calmly, lovely presentation, very optimistic. Marcus's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, confusion, fear, and finally, desperate calculation. I could practically see his mind racing, trying to figure out what I was doing here, how much I knew, and how he could spin this situation to his advantage. Isabella, he said finally, his voice strained. What are you doing here? I am chairing this board meeting. I replied simply, it is my company. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus looked around the table at the faces of the most powerful people in the industry, all of whom were watching his reaction with intense interest. Your company, he repeated weakly. I nodded, standing up slowly. Isabella Martinez de Santos, perhaps you remember me, your wife. The woman you called worthless, mentally unstable, and completely incompetent. Marcus's face turned pale. Isabella, I think there has been some kind of mistake. Oh, there has been a mistake, all right, I interrupted, walking slowly around the table toward him, but it wasn't mine. I clicked the remote, and Marcus's presentation disappeared, replaced by a new slide, De Santos Mining Corporation, Financial Overview. Let me share some real numbers with everyone, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. De Santos Mining is valued at approximately $2.8 billion. Our annual profits are around $400 million. We employ over 10,000 people across 12 countries, and we have mineral rights that will generate income for the next century. I clicked to the next slide. Whitfield Enterprises, the real story. Mr. Whitfield has offered to buy my company for $800 million, less than 30% of its actual value. His business plan, which I've had the opportunity to review, involves immediately selling our mining rights to foreign interests for over $2 billion, while laying off approximately 8,000 employees. Murmurs of disapproval rippled around the room. These people understood business, and they could see exactly what Marcus had been trying to do. But here is the most interesting part, I continued, clicking to the next slide. This one showed a timeline of Marcus's personal life alongside his business activities. Mr. Whitfield filed for divorce from his wife, that would be me, in October, claiming she was mentally unstable and incompetent. In November he began publicly dating his new girlfriend. In December he got engaged, and throughout this entire period, he has been attempting to acquire De Santos Mining, claiming that the missing heir was probably dead or incompetent. I turned to face Marcus directly. Tell me, Marcus, when you were calling me worthless and kicking me out of our home, did you know that I was the heir to a fortune worth nearly $3 billion? Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His face had gone from pale to red, and I could see sweat beading on his forehead. Because I am curious, I continued, my voice like ice, about whether this whole thing was just incredible stupidity, or if there is something more criminal going on here. Isabella, Marcus finally managed to speak. You have to understand, I didn't know. Didn't know what? I asked sweetly. Didn't know that I was worth more than you could ever dream of being. Didn't know that the woman you called a failure actually owned one of the largest mining operations in the world. I walked closer to him, and I could see him shrinking back. or didn't know that destroying your wife's life and stealing her inheritance might have consequences. I never stole anything from you, Marcus said desperately. The divorce was legitimate, was it? I clicked the remote again, because I've had some very interesting conversations with Dr. Richardson, your pet psychologist. Turns out he is very willing to admit to falsifying his reports when faced with the possibility of losing his license and going to prison. Marcus's face went white. Around the table I could see the board members and investors taking notes. This wasn't just a business meeting anymore. It was the public destruction of a man who had built his empire on lies and manipulation. And then there is the matter of my grandmother's jewelry, I continued. The jewelry you sold without my permission after forging my signature on documents you claimed were for insurance purposes. That was a misunderstanding. Was Veronica a misunderstanding too? I asked. Because I am sure she'd be very interested to know that you started your affair with her 6 months before you filed for divorce. That is called adultery, Marcus. It tends to affect the terms of divorce settlements quite significantly. Marcus was trapped and he knew it. Every word out of his mouth was digging him deeper into a hole, but I wasn't finished yet. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, turning back to address the room, I want you all to understand what you've witnessed here today. Mr. Whitfield didn't just try to cheat me out of my inheritance. He tried to steal a company worth nearly $3 billion by exploiting what he believed was a desperate situation. I clicked to my final slide. Justice. This is what happens when you underestimate a woman, when you assume that because someone is kind, they are weak. When you mistake silence for stupidity and patience for powerlessness. I walked back to my chair and sat down, every eye in the room following me. Mr. Whitfield, I said formally, your offer to purchase De Santos Mining is rejected. Furthermore, I'll be forwarding your business practices to the appropriate regulatory authorities for investigation. I believe they'll be very interested in your pattern of fraudulent acquisitions. Marcus was shaking now, his confident demeanor completely destroyed. Isabella, please. We can work something out. I made mistakes, but the only mistake you made, I said quietly, was thinking that I would stay broken forever. I stood up and walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. Oh, and Marcus, you might want to have an honest conversation with Veronica about your financial situation, because when the authorities are finished investigating your business practices, you are going to need someone who loves you for more than your money. I smiled one last time. Unfortunately, I don't think that person exists. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving Marcus standing alone in front of 50 of the most powerful people in our industry, his reputation in ruins, and his schemes exposed for everyone to see. As the door closed behind me, I heard Mr. Goldstein's voice. This concludes today's presentation. Security will escort Mr. Whitfield from the building. 6 months later, I am writing this from my new office, the same one where my grandfather and great-grandfather once sat, making decisions that shaped the mining industry for decades. The walls are lined with photographs of our mines, our workers, our family legacy, and hanging behind my desk is a portrait of my grandmother, Isabella Martinez de Santos, the woman who taught me that true wealth comes from the heart. The past 6 months have been the most challenging and rewarding of my life. Taking over a multi-billion-dollar corporation isn't easy, but I had something Marcus never understood. I genuinely cared about the people whose livelihoods depended on my decisions. My first act as CEO was to increase wages for all mine workers by 30%, and establish a comprehensive healthcare program for all employees and their families. My second was to invest $100 million in safety improvements and environmental protections. Marcus would have called these moves bleeding heart nonsense. I call them the foundation of a sustainable business. The industry has been watching me carefully, waiting to see if I would prove Marcus right about women being incompetent leaders. Instead, our profits have increased by 22%, while our employee satisfaction scores have reached all-time highs. It turns out that when you treat people with respect and invest in their well-being, they work harder and better. As for Marcus, well, karma has an interesting sense of timing. The regulatory investigation I initiated led to criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. He is currently awaiting trial while his assets are frozen pending the outcome. Apparently, when authorities started digging into his business practices, they found a lot more than just the schemes I had uncovered. Veronica left him approximately 24 hours after his arrest was reported in the newspapers. She released a statement saying she was shocked and devastated to learn the truth about the man she thought she knew. The last I heard, she was dating a tech executive in Silicon Valley, presumably one with a more legitimate source of income. But the most satisfying part isn't Marcus's downfall. It is what I've been able to build in the aftermath. 6 weeks ago, I established the Isabella Martinez Foundation, dedicated to helping women escape abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. We provide legal assistance, financial support, job training, and housing assistance. In our first month alone, we helped 43 women leave dangerous situations and start fresh. I also bought a house, not a mansion, but a beautiful home with a garden where I can grow roses like the ones my grandmother planted. Every evening, I sit among those roses and read her letters, of which there turned out to be many. She left me advice for my wedding day, for my first heartbreak, for becoming a mother, for growing old gracefully even in death. She is still guiding me. Last week, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Dr. Richardson, the psychologist who had helped Marcus manipulate me. He has lost his license, and is facing his own legal troubles, but his letter wasn't asking for forgiveness or help. It was an apology. I want you to know, he wrote, that in 30 years of practice, I have never seen such a complete transformation in a person's circumstances. What happened to you wasn't justice, it was poetry. You didn't just get revenge on the people who wronged you. You became everything they said you could never be. He was right about the transformation, but wrong about the revenge. What happened in that boardroom wasn't revenge. It was simply the truth, finally allowed to speak for itself. I keep Marcus's business card on my desk as a reminder, not of what he did to me, but of what I survived. Some people have asked if I am angry with him, if I hate him for what he put me through. The answer is no, I am grateful. If Marcus hadn't been so cruel, so determined to destroy me completely, I might never have discovered my own strength. If he hadn't been so convinced that I was worthless, I might never have learned just how much I was worth. If he hadn't tried so hard to make me disappear, I might never have found out who I really was. Yesterday, I was in a coffee shop when I overheard 2 women talking about my story. One of them said, "Can you imagine, going from homeless to billionaire overnight? That is like winning the lottery." I wanted to tell them that it wasn't like winning the lottery at all. Winning the lottery is pure luck. What happened to me was the result of a grandmother's love, a lifetime of preparation I didn't know I was receiving, and the discovery that sometimes the people who try to destroy you are actually freeing you to become who you were always meant to be. But mostly, I wanted to tell them that the money was the least important part of the story. The real treasure wasn't the $2.8 billion or the emerald mines or the corporate empire. The real treasure was learning that I was never as small as I allowed myself to become, never as weak as I believed myself to be, and never as worthless as I was told I was. I am Isabella de Santos, granddaughter of Isabella Martinez de Santos, heir to a legacy that goes back 3 centuries. I am a woman who bows to no one, who protects what is hers, and who never forgets that true wealth comes not from what you own, but from who you choose to be when you finally have the power to choose. And I choose to be strong. I choose to be kind. I choose to be unstoppable. Marcus thought he was teaching me a lesson about my place in the world. Instead, he taught me that I didn't have a place in his world. I had a world of my own. And in my world, worthless women become queens. The end. Author's note: this story is dedicated to every woman who has ever been made to feel small, worthless, or invisible. You are not any of those things. You are powerful beyond measure, and sometimes the people who try to destroy you are actually setting you free to discover just how magnificent you truly are.